got much more serious about yoga. I became certified in teaching yoga. I was introduced to Buddhism and started going on a lot of Buddhist meditation retreats. And all of these things helped me to heal and also guided me to start to teach other women how they could do this too. And so this just became the foundation of my work that has continued to evolve over the past 25 years.
Wow, that's amazing. It's incredible how the body will stop us in our tracks, right? Alrighty, it is time to stop hitting snooze and awaken to a life worth being, the fun and inspiring podcast that dives deep into what makes life truly fulfilling. I'm your host, Sue Willoughby, a self-proclaimed badass transformational life coach for women over 40. Join me as I explore the extraordinary journeys of ordinary people who've transformed their lives from the inside out. Tune in weekly to uncover the secrets to smashing through your perceived limits and creating a life that's not just well lived, but totally worth being. Welcome to another episode of A Life Worth Being. I'm your host, Sue Willoughby, and today I am so happy to welcome the inspiring Sara Avant Stover to the show. Sara is a best-selling author, business strategist, and mentor. She helps spiritual women entrepreneurs shatter limiting beliefs, align with their values, and build thriving multiple six-figure businesses without burnout. With 25 years of experience as a yoga and Buddhist meditation teacher, she has a deep commitment to weaving spiritual wisdom with practical strategies. Sara has uplifted the lives of tens of thousands of women worldwide. From her evidence-based work with internal family systems to her upcoming third book, Sara is a guiding light for anyone ready to create a business and a life that truly aligns with their soul. Sara, thank you so much for being on the show, and we are going to make this podcast work today.
We are. Thanks for having me, Sue.
Yeah, no worries. So why don't you tell me a little bit about your journey? What got you here? I'm very curious about your experience with the Buddhist meditation and all of that, and how did that come to be for you?
Sure. It came about in an unexpected way. I was a senior in college in New York City at an all-women's Ivy League college, and I was a real, you could say, like type A kind of go-getter, and always pushing myself to the limit. And I realize now in retrospect that was more of a protective strategy from wounds that I had had from my childhood. I didn't know that at the time, but I was planning on serving in the Peace Corps in West Africa for a couple of years when I graduated from college. And so, as a way of preparing for that, I was doing a lot of physical health exams. And in one of those exams with an OBGYN, I found out that I had the early stages of cervical cancer. And that just stopped me in my tracks. Well, one, because literally I couldn't go to Africa because I couldn't get the monitoring that I needed every 3 months there. And also, it just made me realize that the way that I was living was not sustainable. It was a wake up call.
Right.
And I was crushed because that was my post graduation plan. That was the only vision that I had. And then there was a big synchronicity that I think was like the biggest synchronicity of my life. In a teacher that I had had in high school was studying across the street from me. I was at Barnard College. He was studying a teacher's college in New York City. And we met up and just to get some coffee. And I told him what was going on with me. And he said, well, I'm actually about to head over to northern Thailand, to Chiang Mai, to serve as a headmaster in an American style international school. And the woman who is supposed to teach English literature, writing, and dance, which I know are your favorite subjects in high school, just backed out. And he said, do you want the job? I need to know within 48 hours. And I didn't know anything about Thailand, really. So I went down to the nearest Barnes and Noble and just read some Lonely Planet guides about Chiang Mai. And it just checked a lot of boxes. And I said yes. And a few months later in August, I flew over there and I thought I was just going to stay for a year. And I ended up staying for 9 years.
Wow.
And yeah, I loved it. And while I was there, it just completely changed how I lived. It was a much slower pace of life.
Mm-hmm.
And I really delved deeply into a lot of healing modalities, traditional Chinese medicine. I was already practicing yoga, but I got much more serious about yoga. I became certified in teaching yoga. I was introduced to Buddhism and started going on a lot of Buddhist meditation retreats. And all of these things helped me to heal and also guided me to start to teach other women how they could do this too. And so this just became the foundation of my work that has continued to evolve over the past 25 years.
Wow, that's amazing. It's incredible how the body will stop us in our tracks, right? When, it's internalizing too much and it just can't do anymore, right? And it
Yeah.
is it is really interesting how the body will hold on and hold on, and then it's like, okay, no, you got to stop. And here's your warning sign. Here's your,
Yeah.
So wow, that's an amazing journey. So through yoga and Buddhism and everything like that, you said it created the foundation for the work that you're doing now. Tell me more about that, and tell me how it shaped the work that you're doing now, and also tell me about the work that you are currently doing.
Sure. Well, at that time, after those 9 years, I moved back to the States in 2008. I was 30 years old at the time. And I then took this whole body of work that I lived and then created over there. And I wrote my first book about it. It's called The Way of the Happy Woman. And it
Nice.
was an instant bestseller. And women today still tell me that they refer back to it. It teaches women how to live in harmony with the seasons.
Oh,
And
nice.
so I was very much involved in that, and it's just evolved throughout my 30s. Now I'm in my late 40s, and now I'm working just solely with women entrepreneurs who are more spiritually attuned to how can we share our work in the world, which we feel like is our deep kind of soul service in ways that honor our health and honor our values, but still allow us to give and generate in these larger ways in the world.
So how do you go about that? Because I do think that, like you said, spiritually focused women entrepreneurs do struggle with the business piece of it. Am I wrong with
You
that?
are, yes, because we've been conditioned to see these as two polar opposite things,
Right. Yeah.
business and spirituality, or money and spirituality, when the truth is, and if we look back at, even like ancient Eastern cultures or even any ancient culture in the world, we see that they're very much intertwined and very much just one and the same.
That's interesting that you say that, because like you said, they do seem very separate. And I do know women in that space that, struggle with feeling okay about charging for their services and actually creating businesses around that. So tell me a little bit more about how you work with women entrepreneurs that are of a spiritual nature.
Well, we do a combination of inner work and outer work.
Mhm.
So the inner work is very much based in internal family systems, or IFS, which is a modality that I trained in and became certified in several years ago and now weave into my work. And it's an evidence-based psychotherapeutic model
Mhm.
that really looks at us not as a singular self, but as having a multitude of parts. And so, in an example of a woman entrepreneur, we can have a part of us that feels really passionate about the work that we do. And we can have a part of us that feels really scared to raise our rates. So we can see we have these like conflicting agendas inside of us. And IFS also says that we have a core self, a self with a capital S. That's more of our spiritual nature. And it's also akin to the soul that can never be damaged, can never be destroyed. And one of the core things that IFS helps us to do is to resolve these conflicts with our parts so that we can be more self led. And so, in working with women, we do the inner work of really getting to know and befriending these parts of us that can stop us in our tracks, like an inner critic part or a
Mm.
taskmaster part that is, in my case at Barnard, that was pushing me to the point of exhaustion, a part that's afraid of being seen and so doesn't post something on social media or get that blog post written. and really start to build a connection with that part from our authentic self so that we can be more self led. So we can be leading more from the truth of who we are rather than letting these parts of us, which are really just young, wounded dimensions of us that are kind of locked in time. They had something challenging that happened to them in the past, and we can resolve that so that we can show up with our full capacity now. So we combine that inner work with the outer work of just the nuts and bolts of building a business, which is just like a series of these different building blocks that we kind of put on top of each other and keep refining as we go. So we go in lockstep of this inner work and this outer work together.
Wow, that sounds fascinating. And I love that I'm not familiar with IFS at all, or that type of work. And that is interesting because yes, we do have all these parts. And um, how do you actually, because you said the core is something that is sort of like our foundation. Is that what I'm understanding? And how do you get to the core and then kind of work with all these other little pieces? I mean, it sounds fascinating to me.
Well, we've all had the experience of those times in our lives or those moments where we just really feel like ourselves. And sometimes it comes, like for me, I think earlier in life, especially, it came through like when I took my first yoga class, I was like, oh, wow. This feels really good. Like I feel something here. I feel something different. Or like my first meditation retreats, I was able to kind of experience something deeper in me than just my thoughts or my feelings. Or sometimes if we see something beautiful in nature or just have like a really connected moment with ourselves or someone that we love, we're just present. And IFS says that there's 8 C's, C words, that are
Hmm.
related to this self energy. And when one or more of these C words is present, that's kind of the clue that we are resting in our essence. And
Ah,
so when I name these off, I usually forget one of them. So we'll see. There's
okay.
curiosity and compassion, courage, creativity, connection, clarity, and then there's the one that I'm not remembering, or a
That's
couple that I'm
okay.
not remembering right now, but you get an idea of it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that makes a lot of sense now. I kind of understand. So what you're saying is when you're feeling how many of those C words at least? Is there like
At
a
least one of them.
at least one of them? You're like, okay, this resonates with me. This is where you know that it's true to you or truer to you. Is that what I'm
Or you
understanding?
know that you have, even if you think about like neurologically, it said that like the
Hmm.
lowest hanging fruit of those C words is curiosity.
Yeah.
And so say that we're in a triggered moment. So let's stay with the woman entrepreneur.
Okay.
You get a challenging email from a customer or client, and you have anger coming up, you have fear coming up, and all these survival instincts are kicking in. If we can go to curiosity and ask like, okay, what's happening inside me right now? That wakes up the neocortex, and it takes us out of the amygdala and the survival brain, and it gives us access to our higher capacities as a human being. And in IFS, we could say that's also our self energy, where we have access to more of our innate wisdom, more of our wholeness, and we're not coming from a place of reactivity.
Exactly. Yeah, that makes complete sense. Yes. Thank you. That was a great example. And yeah, I do that all the time as well. I mean, it takes work to do that. It takes work to pull yourself, step back, take that deep breath or whatever, put some distance between what's actually happening and flip the curiosity switch and say, why am I feeling this way? What is bringing this up for me? What is the trigger, right? What is why am I angry? So yeah, that's great. That's great. Tell me a little bit about your new book or your newest book,
Yeah, I have
playbook.
it right here. So, my newest book, Handbook for the Heartbroken, A
Yeah.
Woman's Path from Devastation to Rebirth. This came about with we have these different cycles of upheavals that happen in our lives. And I just shared kind of big upheaval that happened at the beginning of my adult life when I was 21. And then in 2016 was another big upheaval that lasted for several years. So this book spans some serial heartbreaks that I experienced between 2016 and 2020 that encompassed all areas of my life, like interpersonally, professionally, financially, my sense of identity.
Mm.
And what set this off was my former fiance came home one night and told me that he'd been cheating on me, not
Mm.
just once with one person, but many times with many people over many years. And
Wow.
this was mind boggling for me. It was shattering for me. And it really created such a deep cut through me that I was never the same afterwards. And it was that experience that led me to internal family systems at the advice of one of my mentors who had just become trained in it. And she really encouraged me to take on this modality because even though I had been studying spirituality for many years, I had been a client in therapy for many years. There were still some deeper regions in me that I was not able to access yet.
Mm.
And it was really then internal family systems that helped me to access even like the part of me that led me to be in that relationship in the first place and rooted in fear of abandonment, feelings of unworthiness. And so this book really is like, as the name suggests, a handbook to support women through these darker valleys of our lives, whether it's a breakup or a divorce or any kind of heartbreak, a health challenge, what we're experiencing in the world right now, a natural disaster, an
Mm.
identity shift that comes in midlife. And it kind of gives us the tools to re reorganize ourselves inside and to use that devastation as a portal into deeper wholeness and coming to that place of I said earlier of like feeling more like ourselves. And so this book takes women on a journey through that. I share my own stories. I share stories of many of my women clients and a lot of different practices to help at the different stages like anger and grief and shock and forgiveness and trusting again and coming alive again, and even how to ask for support and how to give support to people who are struggling too.
Wow. That is devastating. That's a lot to have sprung on you. And like you said, unknowingly, and not just one incident, but numerous times and numerous things. That's very hard to deal with. Yeah. Well, I'm glad that you were able to get to a point where you could take that experience and actually create something that can help other people. And I think that, if we, that when we are able to get the messages behind the trauma, behind the whatever else, um, it does allow us to say, oh, okay, that's what really happened. It's information. It's not always great information to deal with, but it's information, and how we ingest that and digest it, I guess, right? Is pretty amazing. So what else can you tell me about IFS and how people work with you on a regular basis, or on when do people come to you and how can they find you?
Um, well, these days, since I'm just working with women entrepreneurs, people come to
Mm.
me when they're facing some sort of impasse in their work that they're not sure how to cross. And sometimes it's a woman who wants to write a book and doesn't know where to start or is having a hard time actually sitting down and getting it done, or a woman who is feeling exhausted by doing a lot of one-on-one work and doing everything herself, wearing all the different hats in her business, and is really ready to work in more of a one-to-many model, really ready to delegate to other people, but doesn't know where to start. So we look at like the practical things of business building, or a
Mhm.
woman in midlife who wants to reinvent, like she's been doing something some way up until that point and is feeling like this isn't totally authentic to who I am. Or I feel like I've been in this like toxic hustle mode and I've been experiencing a lot of cycles of burnout. And as we know, when we enter midlife, even just hormonally as women, that's not sustainable. We need to work, find different rhythms of work. So it can be these outer things that lead women to want to go deeper, but all of these are also pointing at things inside of us. And like I said, maybe these wounds of unworthiness, or a lot of times it's like a heartbreak or a trauma, either a big T or little T trauma from earlier in our lives that hasn't fully been resolved. And a lot of times there's just a deeper healing that we do just gently and carefully around that. So there can be more of just a clearing inside. So we're not acting from these old wounds, but we can really be resourced from a foundation of more wholeness and genuinely create a new pattern going forward in our lives.
Interesting. Yeah, that we don't even realize most of the time what is really holding us back. Like you said, that it does take peeling back the layers and trying to have a better understanding of where those things are coming from. I think, we do as women, especially, just suppress a lot of stuff and just kind of soldier on and, end up in careers that don't light us up and and all of that. Um, May I ask, how did you choose to work with women entrepreneurs specifically and not just women in general?
Well, I worked with women in general for most of my career up until really emerging from this heartbreak portal that I was in for several years. And I'd worked with a subcategory of women entrepreneurs for many years, but I think when I was emerging, I was really just listening inside and asking myself, where am I being called to serve now? What is really lighting me up now? What is the best use of my skills and talents now? And like, where is the world now? And it really saw, okay, there's a lot more women business owners out now than when I started back many years ago. And a lot of women business owners serving other women. And when I started this work back in my 20s, I was just one of a handful of people that I know who was working exclusively with women. And so I just saw a real need for the support of uplifting women business owners and just sharing the wealth of experience that I had, both practically, like nuts and bolts of the things that one learns of being in business for over 2 decades. There's a lot of water under the bridge there, and also just the experience of the inner transformation and helping women to have that experience too, to just really be able to get out of their own way more gracefully and more quickly. So that's just where I felt called to serve. And we're just in a time in our planet where things are changing very rapidly. And I feel really excited for women in leadership positions. And I really want to be a support to women who are coming forward to serve in the ways that they feel called.
I love that. Yeah. And I love how that, like you said, you've got the nuts and bolts from the business, having been an entrepreneur yourself for so long. And then through your trauma and heartache and heartbreak, you realize, hey, you have to, it makes, you need both parts to make a whole, and that you can't move forward no matter how tactical you are if the inside is not matching the outside, right?
Yeah, because what I see a lot is like women will be just pushing and pushing, trying all these strategies and things, and they're saying like, "I'm not getting the clients, I'm not making the money that I want," and just still using all the external things because that's where kind of traditional business is having us look.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm saying actually, we need to look in here first. Like, where's the kink in the hose in here? What are the parts of you that are putting the brakes on when other parts of you are pressing on the gas? And how can we slow things down so we can spend some time with the parts of you who have their foot on the brake and understand, why are you doing this? We bring that self, some of those C words like curiosity, and some compassion. What are you afraid would happen if we move forward and this was actually successful? What are your fears and your objections about this? And we can start to resolve that kind of inner tug of war so that we can get all of our inner selves on the same page and wanting to move in the same direction. And that's when things really start to work. So then we're leading from our wholeness rather than from our wounds. And I think so much of what we have seen in the world is this just success at all costs. And and we as women, especially because we're so sensitive, and women after midlife, when, we can't be pedal to the metal all the time, we have to find a new way to do things. It has to be slower. It has to be congruent with inner and outer.
Yeah, congruent. I think you hit the nail on the head with that. Like you said, I love that you're doing this work, and I love that you've been called to do this work, because I do honestly, as a female entrepreneur myself, feel that, yeah, there's definitely things that we need to overcome and that we don't realize that's holding us back. Like you said, we can use all the tools and all the strategies and that everybody else is doing, and it appears to be working for some people. And then you're like, well, why isn't it working for me?
Exactly.
And then, and then
Yeah, it's not, business isn't one size fits all.
I
Again,
wish,
it's like,
right?
yeah. But that's why it's like, it's really kind of the Olympics of personal development. For
Mm,
me, it's been really the greatest catalyst for my growth. And in that way, it can be really exciting, just where personal development meets entrepreneurship. That's where I meet women, just right at that intersection where there's a lot that can unfold.
that's amazing. That's amazing. And I'm sure you have some incredible stories from your clients of, catching that aha moment, like when things start to just all fall into place. That must be so rewarding, right?
It
For
is.
everyone.
It is.
I love that. I know that you are on a bit of a time constriction here. So please tell me, how can people, if somebody is intrigued by the work that you're doing, knows that they need your help, how can they work with you? What's the best avenue to connect with you?
Well, I think the best avenue to connect with me, because obviously, if someone's listening, you're a podcast listener. I love podcasts too. I have a podcast that's called Herself, and
Yeah.
I talk a lot about internal family systems and women's spiritual entrepreneurship. So that would be a great way just to connect with me and to come into my world, to get to know me better. And then you can also find me at my website, which is just my name, saraavantstover.com. And there you can find all different kinds of resources as well.
I love it. Perfect. I will put all of that information in the show notes. And Sara, thank you so much for, spending your time with us this afternoon. And I really appreciate you, and I appreciate the work that you're doing. And for those of you who are listening and were inspired by today's show, please pass it on to a friend, or use it yourself. Get in touch with Sara and let her help you with your entrepreneurial journey and your inner journey as well. So thank you again for listening. I know you have an option of who to listen to, and also check out Sara's podcast as well. So thanks again. And Sara, thank you for being on the show. I really appreciate you. And I will see all of you next week. Thank you for listening to today's episode of A Life Worth Being. I hope you found it fun and inspiring. And to avoid a bad case of FOMO, please be sure to click that subscribe button. If you love what you heard today, please share it with a friend, and then hop on over to your favorite podcast platform and return the love with a wonderful review and 5-star rating. It would truly mean the world to me. Be sure to follow me on Instagram and on my website. Links below in the show notes. I appreciate you, and I will see you next week for more fresh insights on awakening a life worth being.